weighing in here, I want to cover what could be considered controversial. I debated creating this video because I don't want to cause conflict, and let's be honest, in today's state of heightened emotions, it's very easy to trigger someone, resulting in some potentially bad consequences for either you or the person you have triggered. But I believe it is an important topic and one that may be misrepresenting or at least underrepresenting some very critical points. I want to present both sides of the argument and let you, the viewer, in true academic discourse and freedom, decide for yourself. As I make this video, the midterm elections are just around the corner. As I was researching topics for my next discussion, this topic came up. People with low emotional intelligence are more likely to vote ... blank. And of course, this made me curious. How are people likely to vote based on their emotional intelligence? In my search through various online publications, I began to hone in on the actual research articles that determine how the study was conducted, what exactly they studied, what types of questions were used, as in, were they biased in driving the participants to answer a certain way, or were they giving them the opportunity to choose a different point of view? The population location, sample size, etc. All the things that are important in determining if a study is valid or if it's just some ideologue peddling their unique point of view. Too often, especially as of late, people are too quick to report something as news without fully evaluating the research they claim is behind it. Or they report a very lopsided version of the research, often not even bothering to discuss the limitations of that research, or discussing a very limited and often micro-focused variant claiming to be research, which is in fact a very limited view of the bigger picture. So the first article that caught my attention was one conducted in Belgium, claiming that people with low emotional intelligence are likely to be right-wing authoritarians. Well, before we look at the article, let's look at authoritarianism. Authoritarianism is the enforcement or advocacy of strict obedience to authority at the expense of personal freedom. Now, I seem to recall this happening all over the world lately in both liberal and conservative areas. But hey, let's dig a little deeper into the article to see what it's all about. And to give credit where credit is due, before I rip into it, I should note that the author does acknowledge there are limitations to his study, as all good studies do. But that isn't stopping others from publishing it as if it is fact, and it isn't stopping him from spending more time on one point of view as opposed to the other. First, they used a trait type emotional intelligence scale. And there are two types of emotional intelligence assessments out there. One is trait emotional intelligence, which is a self-report measure and is associated more with personality, and this is the one that's most commonly used. And another is ability emotional intelligence, which is associated more with cognitive ability, what most refer to as IQ. Most assessments out there are trait type, and there are some advantages, but there are some disadvantages. First of all, if someone is low in emotional intelligence and they are using a self-report measure, how can they truly assess themselves? Part of the emotional intelligence scale is self-awareness. Any assessment should not end at just the assessment, as in the case of this study. Instead, there should be follow-on sessions to explore any areas that receive low scores to gain a better understanding of the situation. Only then can you really determine if the area that was scored as low should be addressed, or if it was influenced by some other emotional intelligence deficit, let's say self-awareness for example, that may be driving other areas down. Remember, emotional intelligence development is about restoring balance between multiple facets, not just testing one area and saying, here's the problem, let's put a band-aid on it and move forward. The author of the online publication first cites a research article stating there's a negative correlation between right-wing authoritarianism and empathy. That is, if you are a right-wing authoritarian, then you have low empathy. Then he rightly cites another research article showing that no such relationship exists. Here's where the research in my mind unravels. Immediately after showing there's evidence it does not exist, he makes a statement of fact that it does exist, and then begins to peddle his opinion as if it is fact, supporting said statements with research that leans his direction. And he goes further by latching on to two elements of emotional intelligence, empathy and perspective taking, as if those are the only traits within an emotional intelligence model. They are not. In fact, the model I use has 15 different traits, all of which interplay with one another. In another research article exploring left-wing authoritarianism, the authors found, and I quote, a shared constellation of personality traits, cognitive features, beliefs, and motivational values that might be considered the heart of authoritarianism. They found that the right wing was bound to be more dogmatic and have cognitive rigidity, whereas the left wing would have more negative emotions, demonstrating behavioral aggression, and be willing to participate in political violence. In the previous research, they described right-wing authoritarianism as a willingness to submit to authorities, general aggressiveness towards deviants and outgroups, and readiness to adhere to societal norms and traditions. Many of these same traits are found in what this author calls left-wing authoritarianism. So, how about we remove the right-wing, left-wing narrative and just call it what it is: plain old-fashioned authoritarianism. Notice, I speak ill of the right wing and the left wing as in the extremes of each, and this is the heart of it. It is not so simple to say someone who is low in emotional intelligence will do X. The reality is the what, as in what particular area within the framework of emotional intelligence they are low in. Are they low in empathy, or social responsibility, or reality testing, or interpersonal relationships, or many, many other things? Someone who is high in emotional intelligence can in fact have a deficit in one area, such as empathy, for example. Chances are that person would be less likely to care about others, especially those who are not part of their group, whether it be race, gender, or some other thing. My point is this: emotional intelligence is about finding balance through self-reflection and objective feedback. To say a person will vote for a liberal or a conservative based on their emotional intelligence level is inaccurate. I will say that if a person is low in certain areas, that is, they do not have the proper emotional intelligence balance, they may in fact be manipulated by those around them, especially if they are saturated by one type of information over another. And depending on their lifestyle and how they were raised, they will simply fall in line with what they have been exposed to the most. The key is to ensure you do not live in an echo chamber. You fortify your own emotional intelligence so you are not manipulated by others, and you use objective evidence that is verifiable to make your decision. If you haven't done so already, please hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification button so you are alerted when I release new content. And as always, I hope your day gets better and better. Let's focus on making that happen sooner rather than later.